Right before we jump into this video, if you haven't signed up for the FroKnowsPhoto email list, just look for this orange box over on the site, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I will send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a review of the Sigma 70-200 2.8 OS Sport lens versus the Canon 70-200 2.8 version 3 IS. Now, I took these lenses out into the real world to photograph women's basketball at Temple University. I used two different cameras. I used the EOS R as well as the 6D Mark II. Now, the reason that I did that is because I wanted to natively put it on an EF mount camera, which is the 6D Mark II, which, by the way, doesn't have the greatest focusing points in the world. They're all clumped in the middle, which made things a little more difficult. But I also wanted to put it on the EOS R with the EF lens adapter. So I'm taking a third-party lens, the Sigma, and adapting it to the EOS R and seeing how the results looked. Now, the same thing happened with the Canon lens. I put that on both of these cameras, but it's native and they're supposed to just work, and we will go over more of that as I go through the images. I also am going to end up going upstairs to my computer to do a side-by-side comparison, a more closer look between some of the files so we can try to determine which lens is better, if any of them are actually better. And as always, you can download sample RAW files over on the website. The link is down below, so you can analyze them for yourself, see if you like the Sigma better or if you like the Canon. Now's a good time to remind you that I've done reviews of the Tamron 70-200 2.8 G2 versus the Nikon, as well as doing a Nikon 70-200 2.8 VR review. Those are both linked down below. Now, keep in mind, this Sigma lens comes in a couple of different versions. It's just that the Nikon one hasn't been released yet at the time of recording this, and the L-mount Alliance one, well, we haven't actually heard anything about that just yet, but this lens is available in Sigma mount for any of the 4 people that own a Sigma mount camera. Now, let's talk about pricing. The Sigma comes in at $1,500 for a 70-200 2.8. The Canon version is $2,099, so you can see that is a $600 difference. But the Nikon version comes in at $2,800 versus the $1,500 for the Sigma version when you get that on an F mount for Nikon. Also, there's another lens to talk about. That's the Tamron 70-200 2.8 G2. That lens comes in at $1,300, so that's something for you to keep in mind if you're looking for a third-party lens. Now's a good time to mention that if you're looking to purchase any of these lenses or any camera gear for that matter, use our link at Adorama. It's adorama.com/fro. When you use that link, it helps us to continue to make these videos and make these reviews. Now let's talk about weight. This Sigma over here is heavy, 3.97 pounds or 1.8 kilos, which is a lot of coke, which would be probably a lot more expensive than $1,500. But I've never done coke, so I don't actually know how much coke costs. Steven, you know how much coke? No, Steven doesn't know either. So the Canon one weighs in at 3.26 pounds or 1,480 grams. There is a noticeable difference when you pick these lenses up. You can feel the heft in both of them, but the Sigma definitely feels slightly heavier, which makes it a little more difficult when you're out there shooting. Also, this Sigma lens has an 82mm filter thread. That means there's a lot of glass in this camera. That's part of the reason it's slightly heavier. The Canon, the Tamron, the Nikon, they're 77mm filter threads. Is one better than the other? It's possible with the more glass, you may get better results in something like the Sigma, but when we look at some of these images from the game shot with the Sigma, they look fantastic. Look at this shot right here. Zooming in on her face, she looks sharp, she looks great. Now, if you're noticing there's some noise in the images, well, let me explain to you my settings real fast. I was at 1/1000th of a second at 2.8 at ISO 3200. Both the EOS R and the 6D Mark II are well capable of capturing images that are clean and usable at that ISO. Now, the reason I'm at 1/1000th of a second to shoot sports, I want to freeze the action. So I have no problem bumping the ISO up a little higher in order to help me get the results that I'm looking for. I also shot most of the game with the VR on, or the OS on and the IS on. Nikon does the VR and Tamron does the VC, but they all do the same thing. But you also want to keep in mind that neither of these two Canon cameras have built-in image stabilization in them, so you're just relying on what is in the lenses. Now, I was sitting on the baseline, and I stayed there the entire game because I wanted to try and get similar images with the Canon lens as well as the Sigma lens, but I spent most of the game shooting with the Sigma because that's really the more important thing to see, is how well that lens did, and then get some comparison shots as best as possible with the Canon version. Also, I wanted to run through both of the cameras so we can see the different results that you would get from the 6D Mark II and the EOS R, especially knowing that the EOS R isn't really designed to shoot fast. I'm gonna show you this right now. I lopped through 20 photos in a row with the EOS R and the 70-200 Sigma, and it only missed, let's see, right about here. You can see that it missed to the background slightly, the player running, as well as the second shot, but it looks like 18 of the shots in a row were perfectly fine. And that's an interesting camera to shoot at 5 frames a second because you do not have a full live view. You have the pictures that you're taking, and they kind of just herky-jerkily jump across the screen as you get it, but I was able to get the focus right, thankfully to the camera and the focus system and my ability to move the focusing points quickly with the touchpad on the back of the camera. So in that situation, it did really well. It's very difficult to sit here and say that one was better than the other, especially when using it in the real world situation, as well as looking at some of the sample images. For example, we have a shot like this where I shot through the subjects, somebody out of focus drawing me in, and this is done with the Canon, and it looks great. But I will tell you that the colors seem very similar, the sharpness seems very similar, so that's a good sign for the less expensive lens. Here's something interesting about the Sigma that I'm not really a big fan of. Well, actually, I like the fact that it has a built-in Arca Swiss plate, which means if you're going to put it on a tripod or a monopod, though I don't recommend shooting a 70-200 on a monopod, you should be able to hand hold this in just about every situation, no matter who you are. Even if you have small hands and you can't lift a lot, you should be able to hand hold this when you're shooting. The Arca Swiss plate comes off not easily. You need to literally wrench these bad boys out of there to take it off, which means you're not going to be able to put it on quickly. Whereas with the Canon, now I'm being careful because I don't want to knock anything on the floor, you can loosen this, line up the red dots, you can pop it off. I personally do not use this at all with my Nikon. I always take this off. I know this is the Canon lens. I'll show you the Nikon in a second. But if you're going to be shooting video and you need to put it onto a tripod, you're going to go ahead and want to put this back on. So I'm going to put that bad boy down below, and I want to just show you one more thing with the Nikon version. Now, the Nikon ring doesn't actually come off either. Oh my God, this is so much lighter. This is so much lighter than the other two. This doesn't come off, it rotates, but the foot does come off. You can then press a button right here somewhere. There it is. The foot comes off. The ring can stay because all you need to do is push the foot back on. We did notice, though, that when using this, sometimes if it's not fully tight, you may get a little wobble in the plate. So that's something to keep in mind. I've talked about this a lot with the Nikon version because I hate the fact that the rings are on the outside, which means I can't tuck my elbows as much and keep it in closer to use this as the zoom ring when they make this the zoom ring. Also, you'll notice that it's much tighter than the Canon version. So that means you have to ramp your fingers down and actually exert some force to turn it from 70 to 200. Now that's partly because of the weather sealing is really good in this lens, but I found that in the third-party lenses like the Tamrons and the Sigmas that it's much more difficult to turn these zoom rings than it is in something like this Canon. Right here, the zoom ring's closer. I can use my thumb, and I don't really have to press my forefinger because it just works much smoother and much easier. And this is a weather-sealed lens as well. I prefer it closer to me. I've talked about that a lot. I also think that in the future, most of the lenses like 70 to 200s are going to move the zoom ring to the outside. Let me jump in here real quick since we're talking about camera gear and ask you, have you downloaded My Gear Vault yet? It's the best way to input, organize, and protect your gear, and it's absolutely free. You can also get an insurance quote, which is what I've done, and I've gotten insurance through the app just in case I break something or it gets stolen. I am protected. So now let's get back to the video. Now let's jump into a couple of more sample images right here. This one was done 6D Mark II as well with a 70-200 2.8 sport lens. And as I zoom in, it's just, the colors look great. The sharpness is spot on. It's amazing when you can take a third-party lens in this day and age and you wonder, is it really third-party anymore? Because on the new L-mount Alliance, it's going to be a first-party lens on that type of system. It almost begs the question is, are these Sigma lenses starting to become better than the Canon version for a hell of a lot less? I'd be curious where the money difference is. Is it build quality? Because the build quality seems really good, and the sport lenses and the contemporaries and the art lenses have all been put together very well over the last 6 years since they started to introduce them. But the colors and the tones look great on this camera. Now let me jump over to one that was taken with the EOS R. This is with the EOS R. And as you zoom in on her face, you're like, is it focused? I really do think it is. But let's go down. The ball, sharp. The feet, sharp. The legs, sharp. This is definitely usable. And as you zoom in closer, you may go, is it out? I actually don't think it is. I think it could be slightly sharper, but you see there's sharpness in the photo in places where it really matters. I think a lot of this comes down to the camera. Using the EOS R to shoot action and being able to move those focusing points is a little more difficult. And using the 6D Mark II, on the other hand, is definitely more difficult. Honestly, I know this isn't a review about these two cameras, but the EOS R's quality, even though it's not really meant for shooting sports, still ended up giving me better images than the 6D Mark II. But really, do you see much of a difference looking at these two images and go, well, that was definitely the Sigma and that was definitely the Canon? I didn't feel that at all while I was shooting. This is done with the 70-200 Canon. This one looks great. I love the clarity on this. The color, the tones look very nice. But then switching to the next image, you're like, it's not the Canon, it's actually the Sigma. And as you zoom in, she is super duper sharp. The colors look good. The bokeh in the background looks great. And I really can't complain about either of the lenses, even adapting it to the EOS R, which is something that people are going to want to know. The Nikons should adapt perfectly well to the Z6 and the Z7 and get image stabilization built into the body. Now, the reason I bring up the Nikon version is because Sigma makes this lens for Nikon. It's just not out at this time. And when it does come out, I'll put it side by side against the 70-200 2.8 Nikon as well. Now, some people may be wondering, how does this Sigma lens work for video while handheld? Well, I put it on the EOS R to shoot some of the game with this lens, and it did very well. I was surprised how well it kept up with the action, even on the EOS R with an adapter, with the OS on. I did a little bit of samples with it off just to see what would happen. It definitely wasn't as stable, and you can see it when I go from off to on. It was just much more stable, obviously having it on. Now, I wish that Canon had it built into their bodies, the image stabilization, but with that being said, it did do a very good job. So you got to see some of the images right here, but I do want to take it upstairs to my desk to analyze the images closer and put them side by side so that you can get a closer look to decide whether or not you like them and if the third-party lens in the Sigma is perfect for you. So now let's jump up to upstairs. So here I am upstairs at the factory in front of the computer, as you can tell. So let's take a closer look at a couple of these images and then put a few of them side by side to see if we can really see a difference. So let's take a look at this shot. 1/1000th at f2.8, 3200 ISO, 114 millimeters with the Sigma Sport lens on the 6D Mark II, which, as we know, is a little more difficult to focus with, but it nailed this. Look how sharp the ball is. Look how sharp the face is. Look at the nice colors. We got a purple jersey. We got yellow on there. Sharp all the way through. You've got the nice bokeh in the background. I mean, I would prefer being able to blow that out more, but if I was zoomed in any further, I would have cut something off when she took this shot. So being at 114 millimeters was where I needed to be. But this looks great. Moving on to the next one. Can we tell the difference? I mean, it's in a different part of the arena, but this one was done with the Canon. I will say that I couldn't really tell the difference when autofocusing between the Canon and the Sigma. They both did a great job on both the EOS R and the 6D Mark II. It would be very difficult to sit there and say, well, one focused better than the other because they both just focused and they both just nailed. The differences are the weight and the zoom ring on the outside. I absolutely despise the zoom ring on the outside, like I said, but when you zoom in on the shot, it's spot on. You can see that she's sweating. You can see the eye is nice and sharp. The ball is, wow, look, the ball looks a little wobbly, but you got it. Moving on to the next shot, I shot this one at 70 millimeters with the 70-200 Sigma Sport lens, so it's obviously wider, but right under the basket, oh, this is done with the EOS R as well, so it looks great. Got my focusing point where I needed it. You have the girls going up for the rebound. I don't think it was a shot unless she got totally smashed trying to get that shot and then went to the line, but it looks spot on. Focus-wise, right where it needs to be, right here. The ball, everything looks good, color looks good, tones look good, and it's not the easiest of situations to shoot in. Keep in mind, I'm in a gymnasium. They do have better LED lights that they replaced in there, but I'm still at 3200 ISO at 1/1000th of a second, and I can't tell the difference between which lens shot which image and on which body. It doesn't really matter. They seem to be working very well, but this is where we can take a look at something. Keep in mind, these are not edited. But we do have 14 custom Lightroom presets that if you would like to try them out and see how they work, head on over to FroKnowsPhoto.com/presets where they are currently on sale. So go ahead and take advantage of that if you'd like to press one button, two buttons, or get a great starting point with your images. FroPack 1 may be for you. Now here are these two shots. We've got them side by side. Right here on the left, we have the Sigma, and on the right, we have the Canon. So as I zoom in, we can see that the Canon is super duper duper sharp. We can see that the Sigma looks like I hit the eyelashes. This is on the 6D Mark II, both of them. This is my focus miss on the one. It's not the lens missing because we know the lens can hit. It's not easy to shoot the same subject with two different lenses while you switch to one and switch to the other and have her stay in the same exact area. It just so happened that I hit it with the Canon easier than I did with the Sigma. But it looks so sharp on the one side. Now let me jump over to line up these other two images. So we'll put these together side by side. We've got the Sigma on the left and we've got the Canon on the right. You can see that her eye is turned this way, so it's better, but you can also see that I hit her nose here. So if we just look at the nose and we look at the skin, I mean, that's my answer. I wish I would have hit the focus there so it would be more representative, but you saw my focus during the game. It was nailed. I nailed it with the Sigma. I nailed it with the Canon. And it's very difficult to sit here and tell you that one is better than the other when using it in the real world situation. To wrap it up, there's a couple of things to keep in mind when you're making the decision on whether to go with the Sigma or to go with the Canon in this particular situation. You've got price, $600 difference. You've got some of the focus ring turning, the fact that you can't take the ring off the bottom unless you unscrew the mount plate, and you've got the weight. It's heavier. But in this day and age, does more expensive mean better? I know from personal experience using the Canon 70-200 version 1, version 2, and version 3 that I consider those lenses, well now the version 3, to be the sharpest 70-200 I've ever used. It's a fantastic lens. It's worth the price of $2,099. But if you're just starting out looking for your very first 70-200 2.8, you don't have to spend the $2,000 plus when you could spend $1,500, still have $500 to play around with to get another good piece of glass. It makes it hard for me to say go Canon. If I was a full-time professional, I'm still probably buying the Canon because it's a little smaller and lighter and it still has the zoom ring in closer. But at the end of the day, you're not going wrong with either of those. Don't forget, you can download sample RAW files, you can pixel peep, you can see which one is best for you. Leave me some comments down below with which one you think is better and which one you would go with. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I'm gonna leave it right there. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.